And again, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mark Daynes. He, like Jim, has a lot of experience, over 30 years experience working in IT. He's also an Oracle ACE director, and he is here to talk to us about using graphs in a very interesting application. And that's what I love about graphs. When people come up with all kinds of interesting new applications where they can use graphs. So his current focus area in his work is to help customers achieve excellence with Oracle Cloud applications and associated technologies like analytics, spatial, ML, and Apex. He's currently the innovation director at Beyond Systems, and I must say this use of graphs is indeed very innovative. With that, Mark, take it away.
Oh, can I just add one more thing, just from behind the scenes here? Mark, the fun fact about Mark is that he has 25 guitars. Now, that I'd like to see a picture of. And aims to do a gig one day when he gets to use a different guitar for each song. I'm with you there. I only have 6, Mark, but I'd love to do the same.
I think when you get 6 of them together, they start to proliferate. So you got to go and keep checking to make sure how many if you go back on that cover, there's probably about 12 there now.
Yeah,
That's what
you're right. Well, take it away, sir. Thank you for talking today.
That's what happened to me. Yes. Right. Super duper. I got a great introduction there, so you don't need to see this slide with me and my various bits of analytics, but that's what I mainly focus on is analytics. I've got a little website, datavismart.com, and on there's a whole bunch of little videos about Oracle Analytics and stuff like that. So feel free to go and check those out if you will. And I do work for a company called Beyond in the UK. We're pretty much focused on Oracle Analytics and that sort of stuff with Oracle Cloud and Cloud ERP systems. So what I was actually doing there was I was doing some work on Oracle Analytics, specific around business intelligence with Cloud ERP and HCM, and looking at the reports that people have been running in what's known as Oracle Transactional Business Intelligence. So if you've got Oracle Cloud applications, you get Oracle Cloud, you get some transactional business intelligence kind of baked into the product. And that's a great tool to look at the transactional data in your systems. I've got an example here on the screen, which is looking at what's known as a subject area, which is pretty much a bunch of facts and dimensions about something. So this one here is about procurement to pay. So there's ones on general ledger or HCM, that sort of diversity. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So there's thousands of reports you can either build yourselves or pre-packed. So an example here, I've created a little report with a compound layout and a chart, so I can have a look at some stuff. And also with it, it has dashboards. So dashboards is kind of an area that you can use to encapsulate these analytics that you build. So you can build a whole bunch of analytics, put them on the dashboard. People are going to use them throughout the organization. Fantastic way of distributing information. There's something as well called BI Publisher, which is more of like a reporting technology. So it's like so you can build like reports and like things like purchase orders and things. So within an organization, you can create a lot of these things. And the question that we often get asked when we look at it is who's using them, who's running the reports, how often they're running them. And then the question is why they're running them. Why are some people running them more than others? Who's what are they actually doing with them? So what actually happened within Oracle Cloud is when the BIP reports, these BI Publisher reports, in 19A of the stack, Oracle started to log away the usage of the reports, the BIP style reports, for 90 days. And in 20D of the product, they started to log away the usage of Oracle Transactional Business Intelligence, the analytics and the dashboard side of it. And that data is all logged away, who's been using it for 6 months. So there's a lot of intelligence in there now. So what we were able to do is Oracle provides some reports, so you can start looking at who's running which reports, who's doing things, what my concurrency is, what's my interaction. I've got these spikes in things. And I can see sort of errors and things, but you can see like when reports started, when they finished. So there's quite a lot of data about how long reports ran for as well, which is quite a key thing. And that's analytics as well as reports. So whilst I was looking at this data and look at the subject areas that Oracle provides to go and look at that metadata, and look at the performance of real time, I built some analytics that looked at the analytics. So the reports I'm running in my cloud ERP or HCM system, we're running hundreds or thousands of them. I can go on, Oracle give me the ability to look at that data and say, which report it was, who ran it, how long for. So we can go and take that data. And then what I did with that was I create these performance bins. So what I did with the bins was just to say, if a report's been running for only less than 5 seconds or something, then put a little bin for that to say that's a sub 5 second report. If it's been running between 5 and 10 seconds, then put it in this little bin here. So we put the reports in bins of really fast reports, and analytics are taking longer to run. So what we could do there is we can sort of look at them and stratify them, and then work out, perhaps let's go and pay more attention to the ones that are taking longer to run. So in Oracle Analytics Cloud, I was able to build myself a dashboard rather like this. Well, it is this, to be entirely honest, where we started to look at the analytics and look and see how many we're running, how long they're running for, how many users there are, how long it's taken to run, see the smoothing of it. So we can get quite a good view of who's actually doing things. And then it's when I got to sort of this, I was doing these sort of analytics in Oracle Analytics Cloud, and I was looking more focused on, say, like the users, and say, well, that's interesting because it's Kirsty Smith user here that's running quite a lot of reports, yeah, but also I can see the reports she's using. I thought Oracle Analytics Cloud is absolutely fantastic for me to create these views of that data. But I thought, I wonder if I could do something in Oracle in Graph to give me a different sort of a visualization. Would that give me anything different? What might it look like? And also, could I then start to play that back to the user community so they can get a view? And would that look different or more interesting or nicer than this? So whilst I've got that, I thought, what would it look like now? So where I've got it in Oracle Analytics, I can do storyboards and create this sort of wonderful story and look at my data and say, here's my number of report runs of certain reports, and here's the sort of people who've been doing it. And then I can create a story and share that with people. But I thought, what would that actually look like in Graph? What can Graph show me? Well, what I did with that was I found the Graph showed me some really interesting things, yeah, and it gave me a different perspective on that data, and it also allowed me to sort of show it to people. We could have different conversations about that data. The way that Graph was able to combine that data and show me like different people running the same report. I could then sort of query it on the times that they were running, and I could query it on the just reports he was running it. We'll get a nice visualization on kind of what that looked like. So how did I do that? Well, I started to use Oracle Graph Studio. It's not something I'd ever had any experience of before, and I thought, could I use Oracle Graph Studio that comes with the Oracle Analytics? I'll say the Analytics Warehouse there, the Oracle Autonomous Database, so ATP or ADW, and I was using it here on ADW. Could I start to use the Oracle Graph Studio, and would that give me an accelerator? Me not knowing very much at all about Graph, would that help me? Is how I saw it. So if we think back, I've got these bins, so I've got sort of a bunch of reports, I've got a bunch of users, I know how long things ran for. So what I did was I got that data out of an Oracle Cloud system, and I created basically a classic fact and what I was as a database modeler would call basically a classic fact table and 2-dimension tables. So I've got the report names as one dimension. I've got the users who are actually running reports as another dimension. I create that as a dimension table. And I've got a fact table then of all the reports that people were running, so I can see who's running which report, and that's just piped straight out of a fusion system. So what I was able to do there, and then I've got this fact table with all that, the how long things took to run on it. So it's relatively straightforward. So I created a table. Could perhaps name these a little bit differently, but one just called basic reports, one called users, and one called my fact bin table. So nothing more complicated than that. Although what I did was I did put a primary key, put primary key and foreign keys on the tables. But I just did that as a matter of course, really. But I found that actually came in quite useful later on in the process. So what I did there was, and that's just me, that's just like what the table looks like. What I did there was, I looked at Oracle Graph Studio and said, right, how do I take that forward? How can I create something that I can actually explore? And it's really, I found it to be a kind of a simple 5-step process at the very sort of simple edge of doing it. One, to create a user. So you have to create a specific user that is graph enabled, that has certain privileges within the database. I then create a graph model, which is basically it's going to take that relational model I've got and create a property graph, create a model for it. Then create a graph on top of that model. Then Graph Studio allows me to create a notebook. So it's rather like the Zeppelin notebooks that you get if you've seen machine learning. So I've been using Oracle machine learning with a Zeppelin notebook. It's a very sort of similar environment to that, to let me create a notebook of graphs and charts. And then I can do, once it's up in the notebook, I can start doing some exploration of that data. So going back to the intuitive layout, as I see it, of Oracle Graph Studio, when I go into Oracle Graph Studio from the autonomous database, it pretty much gives me a great indication of what I need to do. So it says basically start modeling, which is always a key thing. I can look at that and I can say, well, I'll start modeling. And then develop and share. And then on the right-hand side, it gives you sort of a really great bunch of links to what is Graph, how does it work, and what, where you can get some more information about documentations and blogs from it. So what I did was I went into ADW and created a graph user in ADW, and that was no more hard than me. I've given it the name of my dog, actually, so I call it Graph Bungle is the name of my specific user. I just set this little flag here to say it's going to be a graph user, and that does all it needs. All I need to do behind the scenes to set it up to be graph enabled. So when I go and look at that in my autonomous warehouse, I can see that that's now a graph enabled user, and I've done nothing more than basically check a checkbox on there. So when that's up and running, what I also did was I did enable REST on it, because I did read the manual. It says, if you want to load data from local files or execute SQL statements in the worksheet, then put REST on. So I thought I may as well REST enable it. So here we go. I'm in ADW. The way you access the Graph Studio is just to go into the tools section, and it's a tool that's there, so I can just open it up into that thing there. Right. So I press the model to start modeling my data. The modeler interrogates the database. So that goes and looks at what sort of tables I've got there. I've got a different sort of graph types. I think the property graph view is like the simpler of it creates a view on top of the objects. It kind of does all that for me. So I picked out the reports, the users, and that bin table that we looked at previously. So the graph users is all the users who are using reports. The reports is a list of all the names of the reports that are being used, and that fact table is a list of the interaction between the people and the reports. And all of that, as I say, is just pulled straight from the Oracle Cloud system. Now, if I want to create that as at the time, all I do is basically select those tables, press that little button, and you can see here it's just shuffled. I've shuffled those across here because they're the ones I wanted to use. When I've done that, you can see the tram line here, the modeler is guiding me through that process. As I say, I'm not overly familiar with this process. It guides me through that process. Says, look, you selected your tables, here's a model. Now, the product then created the model. Now, you can do different things with this, but I let it create the model. It would create the model for me. It created 2 vertex tables, which were the reports and the users, and then it created the edge table that is my fact table to kind of combine those 2 things there. So it interrogated the database, it looked at the metadata, it knew what the relationships were between those tables. I think by looking at my foreign keys, my primary key on those tables, and it was able to suggest that model without me having to do anything at all. That was fine because that was exactly what I wanted it to do. I then pressed this other button here, next, and then popped up this list of errors and warnings, which basically said the data types that you have in those tables that you've selected, some of them aren't compatible, won't let you load that graph into memory. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in the manual about the data types that you need to have in order for any fields in those tables that you bring across to be loaded into memory. So there might be some tweaking that you might need to do to do that. Those fields weren't particularly interesting to me for the thing I wanted to do here, so that's absolutely fine. So I brought in a bunch of tables basically, and a bunch of fields, and you can see here that it's then I've done the select tables, I've done the model, I've got to the summary. So let's go and just press the button to create the graph, and that thing just guided me through it. So I thought, well, I'll give it a nice name anyway. So I called it a model. I just gave it a bit of description to it and loaded it into memory. Press the button to create the graph. So I'm getting excited now. And then it kicks off a bunch of jobs. And what these do is it loads like a graph environment up. So it kicks this, like, I think it's about 14 gigabyte of an environment that loads into memory, and it loads the graph into memory as well. So because it's all then done in memory. So it's done in memory on the server. Going to my notebook then, which is kind of almost like my fourth stage. So of those things, I've created the user, created the model, created the graph, go and create the notebook. I just gave it a name. And in the notebook, went and typed in a bit of PGQL that I read in a manual how to do it. So it's quite a simple thing. It's basically saying, let's join the vertex and the edges together. And I put it in for a specific user. So what it's done here is it's created. I haven't given it particularly brilliant names. I will say that, which is why the vertices have got A and B and E, and E for the edge. But what that's done is that's given me visual representation of the user here. So I've got the name of the user, and then circling it is the name of the reports that the user's running. And each one of those edges is a run of that report or an iteration of that report. So, and because I've said, just give me 100 of these things on the screen as the default, then it showed me what it can for that user. So I've got 6 more pages down here, which is kind of interesting stuff. 6 more pages to look at, but I can change that so I can look in more detail or fewer detail. But so I can see that that's all pointed to that report there, which is this response detail report. Now that all looks interesting, but what I can do is there's so many settings you can set here to make it 3-dimensional, to put themes on it, but this is one I find quite useful. Is say similar edges to collect them. So rather than sort of keep its default is a keep, so it keeps them all separate. But if I say collect, it'll go woof, and it'll consolidate the edges into like a single edge. So if I was hovering over this, I would see this person here, this Alex Cooper, has run this particular report 45 times. Yeah. Now I can do other sorts of things. I need to make these lines thicker or whatever. But it's easy now for me to start to see and I can go and play that back to somebody. And that was without really me doing anything apart from clicking on some options. So I can go and highlight some things and look at all that. But I can also do some hops. So I can click on that and say drop everything and fetch the neighbors of that particular vertices, and then that goes off and does that graph hop to go and start to look at the relationships. So the relationships that are defined, who is a close relationship, who is a close relation of the person I'm looking at, or whatever. So I can start to sort of move out of that diagram now and start to move around by hopping around and seeing things. And I can start to label things up nicely as well. So I can start to query for like a specific user and start to see much more information. So if I don't go and hop, I can just look for a specific person here, zoom out a bit, start to collect these edges together, and I can start to see what they're actually really trying to do. Now, as well as doing it like on a user basis, and this is just me doing some sort of visuals of it, I remember that I binned all these reports. So all the ones that have different sort of time to run, they're all in different bins. So if I pick a bin that is quite a high bin, so like 240 seconds, it's quite a long time for something to run as an analytic. So I might want to go and focus on those, do that really quite easily just by looking at this. And what I can see from this is, if I zoom here on this one here, that there's this particular report, this performance report, where there's different people here like Mark Berry, Tony Black, So I can see Tony's run it once, this person is running 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's about 20. If I look at all these things here, this report's actually run really slowly 22 times for different people. So if I go back and look at my original data, I can see that in my original data by just writing some SQL. Now I can write the SQL and put it into the notebook, so it's all in the notebook. But I just went into the SQL developer just so I could do it there. So if I go and look at that facts table, the original relational table, and go look at the facts of that, and see that, I can see there's 22 of those for that report. Now, but that's me having to write the SQL to work that out. But here, it pops out to me immediately. If I say, show me anything greater than 24 seconds, it's these things here. And then I can go and have a look at those. If I add those up, they are 22 seconds worth of report. So it's given me that data much more quickly and easily than I would before. So if I go back to SQL, I go back to my land of SQL, and I say, look at for a particular report in SQL, overview KPIs report, and group it by username, I can see that Kirsty Smith's, most people have been running it a few times, up to 20, but there's a real big outlier here if I wrote that SQL. If I look at that in a graph view, it sort of really does pop out to me there. So let's take this executions of this report here by Kirsty Smith. We're in this specific report 119 times. Now, if you run it 119 times, and I looked at the bins and found out that actually of those 119 things, the slowest was between 60 and 120 seconds, and there's 3 of those. Now, if I go back to my graph model to look at this report here that's been run by Kirsty Smith 119 times, of which 3 are really slow, which will have to do with SQL. Well, if I do that as a graph, I just say Kirsty Smith running that report, I can see all of those edges here, and there's 119 of those because that's what I told it to do. If I just say consolidate that down to one edge, it's going to give me that, really, yeah. But what I can do is I can use some of the color coding in here and edit the highlights. So I can create a highlight, and I can create as many highlights. I can create loads of highlights. But I created a highlight here, and I called it the between 160, between 620 seconds bin. I say, tell you what, color all of those in red. So I'm expecting to see, if you think about it, I'm expecting to see of all of those, I'm expecting to see 3 that are in red, and all I do is press the button, say, give me all the ones in red now that over in this bucket here, and then that is going to do that for me. So I can see, so I can put them in different color patterns. So I could say, show me all the ones that are really long running, and put them in this color and highlight them and bin them out to me. But then I can start to do more exploration of that. Yeah. Now this is just a short session I've got here, so I'm kind of going to leave it at this point here. But I'm able to do so much more in graph and see so many things as a visual person. It just gives me different perspectives. And this is not running any of the 60 plus different sorts of algorithms that are available in the Graph Studio, which I'm starting to look at. So you've got stuff like page ranking, and you've got different relationships. You can start looking at communities of people. Who are the communities of people that we've got here? So we can start to think about, if we start to enrich that data, put maybe job titles in it and roles, are there communities of people who, I can look at together. So I've taken this massive data of all these reports and analytics that have been running over time and started to look at them in a sort of a very much of a different way. So in a summary, you can use Graph Studio with relational tables in your autonomous database. Even the free version lets you do that. I put in a couple of links here that are things I found relatively interesting, which was like a fact about the graph itself and the documentation. But I say, yeah, there's so much further enrichment you can do about that. And then there's a whole bunch of built-in analytics to the product that was, rather than sort of just like visually exploring it like I've been doing, we can start let the graph engine do the work for us to start to find insights for us. I think that's where I would start to take it next. So that's my very short 25-minute session. And
that was brilliant, absolutely perfect timing, Mark. Thank you. That was really interesting. It was good to see a step-by-step movement through it, especially if you've not done it before and then seen such a marked difference in the frame of reference that you can now see the data through.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you
very much. Yeah.
a
All right,
question
thank you.
for Mark. Maybe we can take that one question, Roger. Do you want to read it out for?
Oh yes, sorry. Yeah, I'm sort of already on to the next thing. So
Yes.
yeah. Do you want to just read it there?
So Dan is asking Mark whether
Oh,
you
there it
looked
is.
at visualizing this in OAC or some of the other tools so that you can share with users what is causing the performance issues that you're investigating. And I'm going to add on to that a little bit and say, what did graphs give you when it came with that relational that you could not get from relational queries, perhaps?
Um, I think it was that visual pop that I really got from it. Is to be able to see the relationships in and you sort of move on, so you can sort of see instantly the relationships between people. So like from a visual perspective, you can see, oh, that links to that and that links to that. That it is, I find it's more difficult to do that in some other tools. Yeah. To get that graph and then maybe able to sort of move on and go, oh, that's interesting. Let's hop to somebody else, or let's group those people together. And let's start to, you can use the sort of the visual color coding things are there that would make the size of the things different depending on certain aspects. You could just get that. I think that level of exploration that just gave me, as I was saying, I'm seeing it from a different perspective, really.
Right, gives a new dimension, right? That's kind of yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I
right.
was looking at the answered questions and I couldn't see anything. That's why it's not very helpful. So, all right. Well, anything else? I think that is it actually.
Right.
Mark,
Super. Thank you very much.
much
Thank you very
appreciated.
much,
So
Mark.
it'd be good to sit and jam on a guitar sometime when I'm next over there.
Well, we could always do it remotely as well.
Yeah,
Always do it through
good.
Teams.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Right.
All right.
Thanks.
Right, we're